Copyright is when a company or a person owns the rights to a certain image or text or something like that.
Well, copyright law is the ownership of any kind of property of a person, like a movie or a song, and it allows them to keep their rights to that for their entire lives and 70 years after they die.
I guess copywriting is the legal system set up to ensure if people come up with ideas, they're able to keep that safe.
Laws that protect the artists and their royalties towards the music.
No, I usually try to pick it. Like most things that you find on the internet, as long as there's no, sort of like copyright label on it, you're able to use. It's free range. So I've been able to use most images, and as far as texts, as long as you quote everything, it's fine.
The only time that I've ever been concerned with that is during like paper writing and things of that nature, or making like a video that I posted on YouTube just because you use somebody else's song, or you like use somebody else's work in your own work.
I don't think about infringing on copy laws because I need to do what I need to do for my students and get the supplies that they need.
I worry about creating something that I may have seen subconsciously or I've forgotten about, or just coincidentally I create something that does resemble something else. I worry about that getting in the way, doing it by accident, offending someone, or feeling like plagiarism is a bit in work is difficult. I am usually flattered when my work is copied similarly, but there's a bit of me that dies, so I try not to infringe on people's work myself and create my own stuff, and I think encourage other people to create their own things. But yeah, it can be difficult.
Well, in my experience with the Targum, things were, I think, a little bit more clear-cut in music, because if you're taking a source or something like that, if you're using some of these texts, you know how to attribute it. It's like basically the fundamentals of journalism, attribution, because you can get in so much trouble if you do something wrong. If you do something illegal, it can ruin your career, it can ruin your paper's whole reputation. So it's kind of, if you are taking something from somewhere, you source it, and this is not to say that there's no gray area, but I feel like it's a little bit more clear-cut than music, because news is kind of, your writing styles are kind of what's more stylistic, but everything else, the reporting, it's facts, it's kind of really black and white. With music, it's just creativity. It's a whole spectrum of ideas and things that are flowing from people. So I feel that it's definitely harder to judge something like that on music as opposed to something like journalism.
No, I haven't been worried that anyone's used my material without referencing me. I think I've only had like one article where somebody referenced it ever in my life, but they credited me to it, so I haven't been worried about it.
Yes, it would bother me, but I would understand. I would understand because as a teacher, teachers will or do what they need to do in order to get what they need for their students.
If I saw one of my articles on another website being published by somebody else, I don't think I'd really mind it too much. I mean, I'm kind of an amateur journalist in a sense, and I don't have, I've never been paid for any of the work I've done, so if someone else would publish it, it's not going to really lost on any money. And for me, I think it's a bit flattering because it means somebody else liked your work enough to put it on their own website, and I also think that it's really cool just to have your imprint on the world in some way, and if that's magnified by somebody taking something that I did, even if they didn't give permission, I think that's great. But at the same time, if it's something that they're getting paid for and it's my work, that's obviously unfair because that's, labor that I did and you're just making money off of. And copyright laws are definitely, I think they're good to protect that, but I also think that there's a lot of gray area and other things besides journalism. Going back to music again, I guess, sometimes copyright laws don't always work in favor of the artists who produce the original material. Whereas journalism, it's kind of more, it's hard to say that you didn't take something that somebody else did when the words are right there.
Well, I am an artist, so I create a lot of different works all the time, different visuals, and I put it out there online pretty much for anybody to use. So for me, I don't have too much of an issue with my work being used without my knowing, because that's the way that the beast is growing these days. And by that I mean the internet. For some artists, it's a big deal, and you don't want to have your work stolen, and you could make some money on something that you've created and someone else is profiting from that. So it is a double-edged sword. So I do believe in that it should be shared and for everyone to use, but it becomes a bit murky when profit comes into play, because you've got intellectual property and all this crazy stuff that frankly is very difficult to keep track of. Lawyers have to get involved, and anytime a lawyer has to get involved, it's not as fun as art itself. So it's a tricky subject. If I found out that my work was being used and getting profit out of it without any of that going to me, I'd have some issue with it, I'm sure. I'd want that money to go to a good place. It doesn't have to go directly to me, but maybe not someone who's stealing the work, you know? Maybe that can be used for good. So I would be aware of it and try to find a way to make it right.
I honestly wouldn't care, because I feel like if I was putting up something on my own, I wouldn't be making that much money off of the sales anyway, and I'd probably get more publicity for it if I released it for free. People could just try it and not lose anything from doing that.
Someone got published in our literary magazine. They were okay with like their name and like short story being in the physical magazine that we printed, but they didn't want to post their stuff online under their name, because previously people had been like stealing their stuff and like posting it as their own. So I don't really know how it works, because technically it's like not allowed for people to do that, but it's like she doesn't know like who's posting her stuff and like who's pretending to be her, so she wouldn't know who to like go and like file a lawsuit against, even if she wanted to file a lawsuit. And just like lawsuits are pretty expensive most of the time. Yeah, she just like tries like talking to the person and getting them to like take it down or like report it to whoever website it is. Like if it was on Tumblr or if it was like on some blogging website, she would just say like, this person's impersonating me, can you take down the website? But I don't know how successful she's been with that. But
I would honestly think I would just like to progress the knowledge, and while obviously I would like to get paid for it somewhat, if the like journal or whatever is selling it to the teachers, I'd still be making money. But I'm reasonable. I wouldn't want to charge people a ridiculous amount of money just to educate themselves. I don't think it would really bother me because it's furthering people's education. I mean, if I was a music artist, maybe that would bother me a little bit more, but as long as it's with my permission, I don't think I would really have too much of an issue.
I really think that it's kind of, you make up material and that's great, and you know how to write something well, and you know how to teach or inform and do your job well. And I think there's a fine line between being able to be articulate with whatever you're saying and making a really good educational book, and being able to market that book. And that's a skill that maybe some people have and maybe some people don't have. There's got to be a middleman involved. It's kind of, I can make a really great album, but I don't know how to promote. I don't know how to make CDs. I can't do these things myself, and I think it's kind of the same thing with professors. Maybe they can make this book, but they can't make textbooks, the actual physical textbooks. They can't ship them across all these places. You need a middleman, and I think it's a business, and that's how businesses work.
yeah, no, I don't think that's fair at all. For like the publishing companies to get like the brunt of the money when someone else is putting a lot of the work in for it. And especially like graduate students, like they're working on this for like years at a time, like over 5 years most of the time, and to not get the financial credit for it isn't really fair, because most people don't like get a Nobel Peace Prize for the research that they did. They just get known in their department within their country and sometimes across the world. But that kind of like status isn't equatable to like the money that they've been working for. And I feel like it's like the same with like Spotify. Like you get your music on there, but unless like you get really famous on Spotify, you're not really seeing the money. But I'm sure Spotify is seeing the money. Well, I guess like most of us feel like when we buy the albums that are coming out, the money is going to the company and not the artist. So more people are incentivized to just download the album legally or like listen to it on Spotify where they don't have to pay like $5 a month rather than like pay for every single album they want to listen to. So I think there's just a weird culture around it where people don't really see where the money's going and just opt to like not participate in it.
I mean, I think it's just keeping up with the times. You know, people don't want to pay $20 for a CD anymore, you know. So I think if they want to keep up, they have to do things like that. They have to put it on Spotify. And yeah, they're still putting it on the radio and they're still getting paid for it. So, I mean, I think honestly the amount that music artists and, you know, athletes get paid is absolutely ridiculous anyway.
Artists are not getting the royalties they deserve from their own music, though. At the same time, like, you have a service like Spotify that pays like 1 cent per every 1,000 plays or something like that, right? Some algorithm like that. And the artist is getting jacked unless you have like 5 million plays in your Spotify. So, but it depends because there's other artists who want to give their music out for free. So you have two different sides of it.
The public domain, you know, in some regards, you know, gives us great things, like, yeah, obviously Sherlock Holmes. Like, since Arthur Conan Doyle, like, gave up this whole thing to public domain, like, in the past, like, I think 5 years or so, and movies started coming out, and books started becoming more relevant and free, so people can enjoy that. But for the most part, most things that by the time they're released into public domain are just kind of useless or out of touch with the world we live in currently. So, no, I wouldn't say that most things in public domain are useful to us. I think it's fair in the sense that it protects people's individual work. I don't necessarily agree with the whole 70 years before it becomes public domain thing.
When it was created, it was a long time ago, and technology was very, very different. And the speed at which stuff moves is way different in terms of speed. Now everything is instant, and we see it online immediately. So I think nothing is going to stop the progression of people sharing content, even if they don't get permission. I mean, I feel like people are just going to do what they want to do with the tools that they have, because the tools nowadays are very powerful, and there's very little ways for us to rein that down, that power that everyone has. Some people use it well, some people abuse it, and some people just ignore it. But we do live in a world where that public domain doesn't feel nearly as relevant as it ever was. So maybe we do need to to look at what it means again and how it can be relevant in our society. But it's really not a roadblock in my perspective, because I see people getting what they want, maybe too easily, but still.
I think it's a good idea. I know a lot of, like, especially academic sources that I've seen have had that kind of stuff where it wasn't exactly copyrighted, but you couldn't, you know, just steal their work. I think it's a good way to ensure the fact that somebody, you know, gets credit for their work.
And Creative Commons is like a nice outlet for the whole thing. I don't think it's necessarily going to solve everything, because there are still going to be people that don't want to just give up partial rights to their work. So I guess that, you know, it might just be like a temporary solution to a much bigger problem, but it might allow, you know, some people to comfortably give like credit to their own work without fear.
I think Creative Commons laws are absolutely beneficial. Like, starting off, giving a prime example, Trent Reznor of Nine Inch Nails, all of his music is under Creative Commons laws. People can use. I don't actually know what he does for it, but I know that, you know, on the back of every one of his CDs, you can see the Creative Commons symbol on it, and it's worked for him so far. But I definitely think they're beneficial, especially if someone doesn't want to see their piece of music on like a Coca-Cola ad, but they still want people to pay for it.
It seems like a good step in the right direction. It seems like it's a solution that we can go for, and at least be more aware and have the copyright be more accessible to more people. And I'm all for protecting the rights of the artists, because I am one of them. Many of my friends are, and I'm sure, I mean, they're everywhere.
I definitely do, because it's just source material. It's building material. If they're not making a profit off of it, they're just using it to create something else, and it's, you know, for their own benefit or for the benefit of others. It's really it's not being used for anything, you know, evil or material. It's really just for enjoyment and, you know, for spectatorship. And even, I mean, let's say you're building a house. Whatever companies make wood are going to say, you use my wood to make this house. Why don't I make more money because you use my wood? It's kind of the same thing, you know. If you made your work and you were able to sell on your own, and somebody's using it and they're just using it for their own purposes or the purposes for others to enjoy, I really don't think that's something that should be frowned upon, or something that should be made, you know, statutes against.
Well, it's definitely relevant just because, you know, people are more inclined to steal people's work now with the digital world being so accessible for everything. Like, you can just steal a song off a commercial and then, you know, re-edit it so it's good enough, or somebody can buy a song in another country early and then just sell it, like, or give it away for free in the States. They're actually changing the release date of all music to one uniform day, so that stops. So I think that the war with people infringing on copyright is just going to continue.
Well, I think copyright law is a little outdated. I think that it needs to definitely change because technology is changing, so there's a lot of kind of loopholes, and it's just not really in the place that it needs to be.
But I think the digital world probably made it a lot harder because there's more being produced at a faster rate, and it's like not physical copies all the time that we're dealing with. So that's probably definitely made it a lot trickier. But I guess it was always pretty hard to figure out just like how strict the law needs to be. Because I feel like too strict doesn't work, but too lenient doesn't either.
I think people are definitely more afraid to publish their works now. I know that like artists are less likely to put their things online just because once it's online, people can take it and do whatever they want with it. They can also take credit for it when it's not right. So yeah, I would definitely say that people are less willing to publish works, at least in the cyberspace.
Some people, when they get like enough followers, they like end up like just like publishing their stuff, and that just like helps them because they actually get paid for their work, and like people are able to like participate and like read or listen to their things. But I guess it does stop the flow of information from being like as effective. I think people on the internet just always struggle with posting their stuff online because people end up stealing it, and it's not protected even though technically it is.
Yeah, I definitely do think that is stopping society from progressing because, like you said, it's irrelevant at that point. I think it needs to be, you know, public domain when it is relevant so that we can progress, whether it's musically, you know, through film or through education. Society can only progress if it has sources that are readily available to it.
I really don't think there's a clear good answer. I mean, obviously, yes, if people don't want to put out their ideas because they feel that they're not going to be fairly compensated, it's going to stifle ideas, that's going to hold us back. At the same time, if you dangle enough money in front of somebody, I think that's also enough motivation for somebody to go and find a great discovery. And I mean, that's just the thing, some people are motivated differently, and I think there's some people that are motivated by money that wouldn't be doing it unless there was, you know, great amounts of money involved. There are other people that are just doing it, you know, to be benevolent, and they want to see the advancement of humans. And I think that you really, it's hard to say, but I think ultimately making it as a commodity is going to mean that once things are developed, it's also going to be treated as a commodity. Let's say you have a great cure and you start selling it to people. I mean, it's not, ideally, everyone could just have, you know, cures and great things and you wouldn't have to pay for it. But I mean, it's kind of a bigger issue that we're not able to produce as much as we can for the entire world. And I mean, there's things that can be regulated, but I think that goes way beyond. It's kind of a huge, bigger picture issue. I think there's tons of social and cultural and economic factors that go in. And it's really hard to just pick apart how infrastructure really works. But I think ultimately, it's hard to say. I think that it gives and it takes away. Maybe it takes away a little bit more than it gives.
I guess when you really think about it, a lot of average people have their work stolen without the whole copyright protection, because the fact of the matter is copyright's only useful, I guess, when people really care or they can afford a lawyer that'll care for them. I think that the best course of action would maybe be to, give up the rights after the person dies to copyright, like maybe in a shorter amount of time, or come up with new copyright law if the artist or whoever doesn't really care if it gets lost to them after they're dead, or even after a certain period of time.
I think the copyright laws have a really huge gray area. I don't think they necessarily are too harsh. They can be too harsh, but they can also not be harsh enough. I think they need to be adjusted to the technology of today in order for them to be more relevant.
Sure. I haven't put too much thought into it. It never was a subject that really bothered me, but I don't see why looking at reassessing the rules and what's relevant in terms of a law that was established a long time ago. I'm all for that. Yeah, so.
I think something should be done for it. I don't know if copyright laws need to get stricter. I don't think that's the answer. But I think there needs to be more thought about with how the laws are working, because it seems to be protecting certain people over others. So I feel like the companies that are in charge of the production are kind of being protected, versus the people that are actually coming up with the ideas and with the music and with the work. I feel like their rights and their work isn't being as protected.
I mean, I think anything is really open to reform and progression, and I think that's how great things are made. As a writer, you never go with what you first put down, and it's because you can always do better. And I feel like with most things, you can always do better. So, like everything else in the world, I feel like copyright laws, of course, can use reform, and of course, can use change.